He saved her life. Later, he lost his job, nearly his reputation. After hours of grueling hiking and rendering first aid with only what he had in his pack, Kevron finally made it out of the forest. The injured woman, still dazed, her eyes fluttering, open and closed, was strapped to a makeshift stretcher he and another hiker had fashioned from branches and jackets. Paramedics took over as soon as he emerged from the trailhead. Kevron didn't stick around for applause or recognition. He just handed her over, gave them a rundown of her condition, and quietly walked away as the sirens faded into the distance. His phone, finally catching a signal, buzzed non-stop with missed calls and messages. His heart sank. Most of them were from his job. The next morning, Kevron showed up to work, weary but believing he had done the right thing. He was prepared to explain, even apologize. But as soon as he walked through the door, his manager met him with a hard stare. "You're being let go," they said flatly. Kevron blinked. "What? Why? What did I do?" "You abandoned your shift. No notice, no call. We can't have that." "I was hiking," he tried to explain, "and I found a woman who'd fallen. She was seriously injured. I couldn't leave her. I didn't." "Have any signal out there?" The manager held up a hand, already turning away. "Doesn't matter. Policies are policies. No hearing, no conversation, no consideration." Just like that. Job gone. Kevron walked home in a daze, the same way the woman had been carried out. His apartment looked smaller than usual. Quieter. He sat down on the couch, elbows on his knees, trying to shake the numbness. He had done the right thing. Hadn't he? That woman might not have survived the night without help. And yet here he was, unemployed, uncertain, and defeated. A week passed. Kevron filed for unemployment, scraped together his savings, and started applying to other jobs. He told no one what had happened. The world moved on. He didn't. Then, one afternoon, a knock came at his door. Kevron opened it cautiously. A man in a suit stood there, smiling. "Are you Kevron Hale?" "Yeah. I'm Daniel Morton. I work with the Hastings Foundation. May I come in?" Kevron blinked. The Hastings Foundation was one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country. He nodded slowly and stepped aside. Daniel sat down and opened a sleek leather folder. "I'm here about the woman you helped last week." Kevron's heart skipped. "Is she okay?" "She is." "Thanks to you," Daniel said, smiling. "Her name is Clara Hastings. She's the daughter of our founder." Kevron's eyes widened. He hadn't known. She hadn't said much at all, drifting in and out of consciousness on the trail. Daniel continued. "She told us everything once she recovered, how you stayed with her, risked your own safety, even gave her your jacket in the cold. You saved her life." Kevron swallowed, unsure what to say. She was deeply moved. "And so were we," Daniel said. "The Hastings Foundation would like to offer you a full-time position, head of our Community Response and Outreach Division. It pays double what your previous job did, and you'll have the chance to help people every day, just like you did for Clara." Kevron stared, speechless. "And," Daniel added, sliding over a check, "this is a personal gift from the Hastings family. A thank you." Kevron looked down. The amount made his chest tighten. It was more than he'd made in 2 years. I don't know what to say," Kevron murmured. "Say yes," Daniel said with a grin. "We could use someone like you." Kevron looked out the window, sunlight streaming in, warm and golden. The world had flipped again, but this time in his favor. He thought back to that moment in the mountains, her face pale, his breath fogging in the air, the silence around them heavy with fear. He had done the right thing, even when it cost him everything. And fate had just repaid him in full, with a steady voice. Kevron said, "Yes, I'm in." That same night, across the country, in a sleek private medical facility tucked into the hills of Northern California, the woman Kevron had rescued stirred awake. Her recovery was fast, miraculously. So, the doctor said. But as soon as her mind cleared, she had only one question. "Who saved me?" Nurses hesitated. A few glances passed between them. "His name was Kevron Hale," one finally said. He didn't stay, just gave the medics what they needed and disappeared. Valentina Crest sat up straighter, her mind sharpened by years of high-stakes boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, locked onto that name. Kevron Hale. She repeated it softly, like committing it to memory. She turned to her assistant, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, phone in hand. Find him, but now. Her assistant knew better than to argue. Within hours, Valentina had a full report. Kevron Hale, 32, former logistics coordinator at a regional warehouse. Recently fired. No formal complaints, no history of misconduct, just let go for leaving work to save her life. Valentina stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. She read the report again, slowly, carefully. He hadn't called the media. He hadn't bragged on social platforms. He hadn't even stayed to hear if she made it out alive. And when he returned to work, he was fired. No explanation, no appeal. She didn't get mad. She got motivated. Contact legal, she said, her voice low and precise. I want the company that fired him on record. If they're publicly traded, we'll have leverage. If not, we'll make them wish they were. Her assistant raised an eyebrow. And Kevron? Valentina tapped her chin. Fly him out. Private jet. No questions asked. I want to meet him, not as Valentina the CEO, but as the woman whose life he saved. Within minutes, her team sprang into motion. Phones buzzed. Legal. Advisors were looped in. By dawn, her quiet recovery room had turned into a miniature command center. Valentina leaned back against her pillows, eyes on the ceiling. A man she'd never met had risked everything, his job, his comfort, even his future, just to help a stranger. That kind of integrity, it was rare. And in her world, it was priceless. I want him to know, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else, that the right thing still matters, that doing good doesn't go unrewarded. She looked out the window as the sun broke over the horizon, golden light stretching across the glass. Kevron Hale had no idea what was coming, but soon, the man who quietly walked away from recognition would find himself standing in a room where power, gratitude, and fate converged. And this time, he wouldn't leave empty-handed. Kevron woke up to a low, rumbling sound, steady, powerful, and growing louder by the second. Engines. Still groggy, he shuffled to the window, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and clutching a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee. What he saw made him freeze. 10 black luxury cars, sleek, polished, and intimidating, were pulling up in formation outside his modest apartment building. The early morning sun gleamed off their metallic surfaces. It looked like a presidential motorcade had landed on his street. Then the door of the lead car opened. A woman stepped out, dressed head to toe in elegant white. Her coat flowed behind her like a cape, and her sunglasses caught the light as she looked up at the building. She was flanked by assistants and security, all dressed in black, moving with practiced precision. Kevron nearly dropped his coffee. It was her, Valentina Crest, CEO, billionaire, tech mogul, one of the most powerful women in America, and the woman he had carried through miles of rugged terrain a week ago. Now she was walking toward his building like she owned it. She climbed the steps and knocked on his door, just once. Kevron opened it, still in his wrinkled t-shirt and sweats, stunned, speechless. Valentina Crest stood on his doorstep like something out of a dream. You carried me through the mountains, she said simply. Now let me carry you into a new life. The world seemed to go silent for a beat. From the hallway and across balconies, neighbors watched in stunned silence. Curtains twitched. Phones emerged. One kid across the street said, "Yo, is that Valentina Crest?" Loud enough for everyone to hear. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her coat and handed Kevron 3 things: a sealed envelope, a smartphone, and a set of keys. The letter, she said, is a job offer. You'll be heading a new medical outreach initiative under the Crest Foundation. Salaries in the 6-figure range, plus housing and travel. Kevron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. She handed him the phone. That's a direct line to my executive office. Use it whenever you need something. You'll be given a team, a full support staff, and whatever resources you require. Finally, she held out the keys to one of the cars outside. Your pick. Kevron blinked, glancing past her at the lineup of vehicles, each more luxurious than anything he'd ever even sat in, let alone driven. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Valentina took off her sunglasses and met his eyes. "Because you didn't have to help me. You could have walked away. You could have waited for someone else. But you didn't. You gave your time, your safety, your comfort, for a stranger. No cameras, no spotlight. Just heart." She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice. "In my world, that kind of integrity is rare, and it's worth investing in." Kevron's hands trembled slightly as he looked at the letter again. He had spent days wondering if doing the right thing had destroyed his life, and now here he was, standing barefoot in his doorway, being offered a future beyond anything he'd ever imagined. The neighbors watched in hushed awe as Valentina extended her hand. "Well?" she asked, smiling. "Do we have a deal?" Kevron looked around, at the quiet street now buzzing with disbelief, at the cars, the phone in his hand, the keys. And then he looked at Valentina Crest, the woman whose life he'd saved, now returning the gesture. A slow smile crept onto his face. "Yeah," he said, gripping her hand. "Yeah, we have a deal." Valentina nodded once and turned to leave, her team falling in behind her. Before stepping into her car, she glanced back and said, "Pack a bag. We're wheels up in 2 hours. Your first project starts in Guatemala." Kevron just stood there, stunned. He'd gone from being fired for doing the right thing to being given the opportunity of a lifetime for it. And this time, he was ready. Word spread fast. By noon, news vans were parked in a crooked row outside Kevron's apartment building. Reporters with messy hair and hastily applied makeup jostled for a good angle, while producers barked into headsets. Microphones sprouted like weeds. The hum of satellite dishes filled the air. Local news had picked up the story at dawn. By mid-morning, it had gone national. "Montana nurse saves billionaire," the headlines blared across every platform. Within hours, Kevron's name was trending on social media. Hashtags like Kevron the Hero, Modern Day Good Samaritan, and He Saved Her Life flooded timelines. News anchors called it the feel-good story of the year. Commentators debated ethics and loyalty. Influencers stitched video tributes. Celebrities tweeted in awe. Late-night comedians opened with jokes that praised, not mocked. People were hungry for a story like his, a story where the good guy didn't finish last. But Valentina Crest didn't stop at handing Kevron a job, a phone, and a set of keys. Not even close. Within days, she paid off his entire student loan debt, every last dollar from nursing school and beyond. It vanished overnight, leaving Kevron in shock. "It felt like someone hit the reset button on my life," he later told a reporter. But she wasn't done. She quietly contacted Kevron's mother, a retired school teacher living on a fixed income, and set up a trust fund in her name. It ensured she would never have to worry about bills again. "Your son saved my life," Valentina wrote in a handwritten note to her. "I want to make sure the woman who raised him is taken care of." Then came the biggest surprise of all. Valentina announced she would personally fund the construction of a free medical clinic in Kevron's hometown. Not just a building, but a state-of-the-art facility equipped with telemedicine units, emergency supplies, and a rotating staff of volunteer medical professionals. It would serve hundreds of rural families in the region. The clinic would bear his name, the Hale Health Center. When asked why she was doing all of this, Valentina's answer was simple. "Because I believe in repaying kindness with kindness." Loudly. Kevron tried to remain grounded. He still drank cheap coffee in the morning, still double-checked his locks before bed. But his world had shifted. Strangers on the street stopped to thank him. Nurses he'd never met sent him messages, calling him an inspiration. A national magazine featured him on its cover, calling him America's conscience. Overnight, Kevron had become more than a nurse. He had become a symbol of integrity, of quiet courage, of what it means to do the right thing when no one is watching, and especially when it costs you something. He was invited to speak at universities, community centers, and even a televised town hall on ethical leadership. Each time, he began with the same words. "I didn't do anything special. I just didn't walk away." Valentina stood by his side at many of those events, offering support but never stealing the spotlight. She watched with quiet pride as Kevron blossomed, not into a celebrity, but into a leader. Someone who understood that influence wasn't measured in dollars or followers, but in how many people you helped without expecting anything in return. He turned down offers for book deals and reality shows. Instead, he used his platform to advocate for better wilderness rescue training, rural healthcare funding, and stronger workplace protections for first responders. And all the while, he kept working, sometimes in the field, sometimes at the Crest Foundation headquarters, sometimes on a plane to the next project. But wherever he was, people knew what he stood for. They saw the way he listened, the way he led, the way he made space for others to shine. He didn't chase the spotlight. He carried it with him, offering it to those who had never been seen. And though his life was unrecognizable from what it had been just weeks before, Kevron never lost sight of where it started. A cold mountain trail. A dazed woman. A decision made without witnesses. One act of selfless compassion. That's all it took to change everything. And when asked years later what he remembered most about that day, not the fame, the money, or the powerful people, it wasn't the hike, or the cold, or even Valentina's gratitude. It was her hand, trembling in his, as he told her, "You're going to be okay. I've got you." Because in the end, that was who he was. Not a hero, just a human being who chose, when it mattered most, to care. And the world? The world chose to care right back. Months later, Kevron's life looked nothing like it used to. Gone were the days of double shifts, cold leftovers, and wondering if anyone would ever notice the work he did. Gone were the doubts that haunted him after being fired for choosing to help a stranger. In their place, purpose, momentum, recognition. He now traveled across the country, sometimes the world, speaking at universities, conferences, and hospitals. His talks weren't flashy. He didn't stand behind big podiums with expensive suits. He didn't talk about heroism or fame. Instead, he talked about choice, about the moment in the mountains when he heard a faint cry, followed it, and found Valentina Crest broken, bloody, and slipping in and out of consciousness. He talked about how he could have kept hiking, how he almost did, and how that single decision to stop, to help, to care, rewrote his entire life. His words struck a nerve. Medical students told him they'd change their career goals because of him. ER nurses wept in the front row. Search and rescue teams invited him to train with them, calling him the guy who reminded the country what compassion looks like. Outside, the spotlight. Kevron was thriving too. He lived in a quiet home just outside Seattle, near water and woods. He drove a sleek black Porsche, his dream car, the one he used to sketch in notebooks back in high school. Some mornings, he'd take it for early drives, just to feel the hum of the engine and remember how far he'd come. He still volunteered at clinics when he could, sometimes anonymously, sometimes halfway across the world. He didn't need attention. He just needed to keep showing up, because the truth was, Kevron never chased greatness. He just never turned away from good. And then there was Valentina. She remained a quiet force in his life, part mentor, part friend, and in some ways his greatest student. Publicly, she called him the reason I'm still alive. Privately, she credited him with something even greater. "You reminded me," she once told him over tea, "that there's something more powerful than wealth, status, or strategy. You reminded me of human decency." Valentina had spent years guarding her privacy, building empires, and surrounding herself with advisors who only spoke in numbers. Kevron reminded her what it felt like to be helped, not for gain, not for glory, but just because someone could. She never forgot that, and she never let the world forget him either. Together, they co-founded several humanitarian programs focused on crisis response, mental health access, and medical outreach in rural areas. The Hale Health Center opened 2 more locations. Kevron's former employer issued a public apology, not because they were pressured to, but because even they couldn't ignore the wave of admiration his story inspired. It had become more than a viral headline. It had become a movement, and all of it. Every scholarship in his name, every kid who chose nursing because of him, every mother who got care at a clinic he helped fund, traced back to that one moment in the mountains. when he could have kept walking and chose not to. Moral of the story? Doing the right thing won't always be easy. It won't always be rewarded. And sometimes, just sometimes, it might cost you more than you expected. But when it is rewarded, it can change your life in ways you never dared to imagine. So the next time you're standing at a crossroads, the next time you hear someone calling out for help and you think someone else will stop, think of Kevron. Think of what waited on the other side of one kind choice. You never know who's watching or what kind of future is watching with them. Thanks for reading. If this story moved you, inspired you, or just made you believe in kindness, again, do us a favor. Like, share, and subscribe, because the world needs more stories like this, and maybe you'll be the next one we tell. A slow smile crept onto his face. Yeah, he said, gripping her hand. Yeah, we have a deal. Valentina nodded once and turned to leave, her team falling in behind her. Before stepping into her car, she glanced back and said, "Pack a bag. We're wheels up in 2 hours. Your first project starts in Guatemala." Kevron just stood there, stunned. He'd gone from being fired for doing the right thing to being given the opportunity of a lifetime for it, and this time, he was ready. Word spread fast. By noon, news vans were parked in a crooked row outside Kevron's apartment building. Reporters with messy hair and hastily applied makeup jostled for a good angle, while producers barked into headsets. Microphones sprouted like weeds. The hum of satellite dishes filled the air. Local news had picked up the story at dawn. By mid-morning, it had gone national. "Montana nurse saves billionaire," the headlines blared across every platform. Within hours, Kevron's name was trending on social media. Hashtags like Kevron the Hero, Modern-Day Good Samaritan, and He Saved Her Life flooded timelines. News anchors called it. Derek kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a slow rhythm on his thigh. Rachel sat tensely beside him, her posture too perfect for someone hitchhiking. Her designer sneakers were spotless, her hoodie crisp, and her skin smelled faintly of expensive perfume, not exactly road-worn. Her backpack never left her lap, clutched like a lifeline. She stared out the window, but Derek could tell her mind was elsewhere. "You from around here?" he asked, his voice light, conversational. "Not really," she replied quickly. "Just passing through?" Derek nodded, but kept his curiosity tucked behind a calm expression. Something didn't sit right. She didn't talk like someone who'd spent the night on a bench or was down to her last dollar. Her words were polished, her voice steady, controlled, too controlled. "You travel light," he joked, glancing at the small backpack. Rachel gave a strained smile. "Didn't have time to pack." That line hung in the air longer than it should have. Derek didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. He knew the look of someone who'd left in a hurry. They passed an old gas station. Derek considered stopping, but kept going. He wasn't sure he wanted to linger somewhere public with a woman who looked like someone might be looking for her. Silence settled until Rachel spoke again. "Why'd you pick me up?" He glanced at her. "You looked like you needed a ride." "People don't usually stop," she said. "Especially for strangers." "Maybe I'm just built different." Rachel looked at him, studying him now. "You ever run from something?" Derek tightened his grip on the wheel. "Yeah," he said quietly. "But running only works for so long." She didn't respond, just turned back to the window. Whatever she was running from, it wasn't far behind. You never know who's watching, or what kind of future is watching with them. Thanks for reading. If this story moved you, inspired you, or just made you believe in kindness again, do us a favor. Like, share, and subscribe. Because the world needs more stories like this. And maybe you'll be the next one we tell.